All right, sorry we're running a little bit behind schedule with lunch, but Your Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the first executive forum of the conference. I'm Abhi Rajendran from the Energy Intelligence's Research Advisory Group, and it's my pleasure to have Charif Souki here with us. He's chairman of Tellurian. Charif, of course, had a pioneering role in the US LNG export revolution, starting off with Cheniere. And now you are working towards building up a differentiated business model at Tellurian, which is obviously underpinned by the Driftwood LNG project. So Charif, let's just dig into it. The current market for LNG, it's a little bit slippery. How should we think about the next couple of years in your view? Is this really just transient with a more robust medium to longer term view? How are you kind of thinking about the LNG world?
I think we're in a transition period at the moment. We're evolving from a point-to-point business model, which historically was underpinned by long-term contracts based on oil indexation, to a market that is becoming increasingly a commodity market, but hasn't quite gotten to that point yet. So for the next 5 years, I think we're going to witness a period of uncertainty in terms of how you finance projects, how you understand the market, and how you're going to sell the gas. But it's going very, very quickly. And if you look at the growth curve in terms of financials versus physicals in the LNG business today, you can project that 4 and 5 years from today, if it continues at the current rate, you're going to have the same ratios as in the oil business. When that happens, you can start using new tools in terms of how do you hedge yourself, how do you sell forward on a financial market if you can do it in the physical market. We're still in the evolution stage. So you've seen some of the large projects in the last 12 months that have been FID'd, that have gone basically on a merchant model. So whether it's LNG Canada, Golden Pass, or Arctic LNG, they all have been sanctioned without having long-term contracts. And that's the wave of the future. Eventually, the commodity market will catch up, and you will be able to finance projects on that basis.
And I think one of the things that we've talked about today that the industry is still constructive about are demand prospects. And I think that's why you're seeing a lot of these projects still move ahead. What's your view on the demand side? Where are you excited? Obviously, we all know about China. Where are you excited on the demand side of the coin globally?
Well, I mean, I've heard a lot of different conversations about what's going to drive demand, and somehow we always seem to miss the most important factor: price. Demand responds to price. If you have attractive prices on a global basis, demand is not an issue. In 2019, with low prices, LNG demand year on year is up 12% now. That's a very, very healthy growth rate. So as long as the prices remain affordable and feasible, there is no issue for demand. There's plenty of demand, whether it's in Europe, Asia, India, China. I mean, it's all over the place.
And you kind of have to separate a little bit between gas demand and LNG demand. While the prospects are quite constructive, there are also risks to the LNG part of the industry. What would you say are some of the risks that you are focused on, whether it's emerging sources of gas in certain parts of the world? We talked about renewables earlier today, perhaps the financing model. What are some of the risks on your mind from an LNG project perspective?
Well, it starts with the price of the commodity. So if natural gas prices are low, you will be in a position to deliver them to market. If it's a commodity business, it's not different from any other commodity business. In order to be successful, you need to be in the top quartile in terms of cost. And if you're there, more often than not, you're going to be in fine shape. So it starts with the commodity, and in the United States, we're blessed with plenty of gas. We didn't know that 10 years ago, but now we do. And in fact, we have too much of a good thing. We have an excess capacity to produce gas today. A lot of it is associated. So we have the reverse problem. It's kind of like we need to sell our gas in order to produce our oil. The second component is going to be being able to build liquefaction at attractive prices. In the US, the difference between a very good project and a very bad project is not that big. It's somewhere between the $600 to $800 a ton in terms of your pure EPC contract. And you know, there are outliers, but rarely on the positive side, mostly on the negative side. So if you pick a really bad site and a really bad location, it could be more. But generally speaking, that's kind of the ballpark. And on a global basis, this is extremely competitive. However, there is a scarcity of competent EPC contractors today who are capable of giving you a wrap on that contract if you need one. And on that basis, you have to select your provider extremely carefully in order to have that competitive edge. And then the third component that people seem to ignore is how do you source the gas and how you deliver it from the field to your liquefaction capacity. You cannot have a single node failure. If you have only one source of gas, it is going to be very difficult if the source is not productive or if something changes. And I'll give you an example from my Cheniere experience. We got the sourcing of the gas completely wrong at Sabine Pass and at Corpus Christi. And this is only 5 or 6 years ago. So when we did Corpus Christi, we did not know that the Permian Basin was going to be as prolific as it is today. We were scared to do what would have been more efficient in terms of building additional trains because we weren't sure that we could actually source the gas for the facility. It turns out 5 years later that we were completely wrong. There's plenty of gas, and we should have done 3 trains and maybe 5 trains at Corpus Christi. Now, go to the other side at Sabine Pass, where we felt very comfortable that we could get all the gas we wanted because the pipeline capacity in South Louisiana was operating only at 50% of capacity. So there's plenty of pipeline capacity available to take gas from wherever you find it and to bring it down to the facility. Fast forward 5 or 6 years, that's no longer the case. The Louisiana capacity on pipeline is now operating at over 90%, so it's very difficult to find capacity to bring the gas to the facilities that are coming on stream now. This is how fast the world changed in 5 years. And you have to start building flexibility in your models in order to make sure that not only you can source the gas in the proper basins. And 5, 6 years ago, we were talking about the Barnett, and we're not talking about the Barnett anymore. We're talking about the Permian Basin and the Haynesville and the Marcellus. So all of this has to enter into the equation. You have to find the gas where it's cheap, transport it with flexibility to deliver it to the facility, put it through a well-constructed but reasonably priced facility, and get it on the water for the cheapest price possible.
And this is obviously something that you're working on, with the Tellurian model, which is a more fully integrated and differentiated model. What would you say are specific to Driftwood, for example? Is it always going to be that fully end-to-end solution, or are there parts of the model that are flexible, depending on capital markets? How do you think about that? So
let's take it backwards. We know that we can build a facility on very attractive pricing. We have worked, Martin and I, with Bechtel now for 20 years. We're very comfortable with them. We have a fully ramped contract at $560 a ton. So we're very comfortable with our cost of construction. The second piece is we need to look at optionality in terms of what kind of pipelines do we need. And this is where we start having flexibility in the model and optionality in the model. So we want to access 3 basins. We want to access the Marcellus and Utica. We want to access the Haynesville, and we want to access the Permian Basin. So we have a portfolio of 3 pipelines. We don't know today which one of those will activate first, whether we'll activate all 3 of them, or whether one pipeline will be sufficient. We don't have to make that decision. This is a project that is going to take 5 years to build and which will be in existence for the next 40 years. Things will change as things go forward. But the pipeline network is critical and very important. And finally, the default position is where is the gas the cheapest in the United States today? And that changes on a 5-year model from time to time. And it used to be the Haynesville when you combine the production with the transportation for us. But now all of a sudden, for the last year and a half, it has become the Permian Basin because of all the associated gas that is now coming at very, very low cost, at a very steep discount from Henry Hub. So we have to have the ability to take advantage of all three possibilities on a long-term basis. And that's a moving target. It doesn't take very long to build a pipeline, about 12 to 18 months. It takes much longer to build a liquefaction facility. That decision does not have to be incurred today. If we end up actually drilling for the reserves ourselves or not, that's a question that we will ask ourselves every year for the next 45 years. Obviously not me, but hopefully the people are coming after me.
And you mentioned, some of the shifting dynamics specifically for US LNG projects. And one of those that we've heard a lot more about recently is on the pricing side. How kind of the traditional tolling model is evolving and different pricing mechanisms are kind of entering the discussion. How do you think about that and the outlook for that?
Extremely simple. Our target is to be underwater for $4 or better, and if we're really clever about it, we think we can be underwater somewhere between $2.50 and $3. It's as simple as this. If we are underwater on a tanker for better than $4 an MMBTU on a long-term basis, and our partners are invited to participate with us, they can get it to anywhere in the world for less than $6. That is what will create the demand. And functionally speaking, this is the first time that I've seen in the history of the natural gas business and the LNG business that there is a situation where a country actually must sell its gas. It's not an option. It's not something that would be nice. We must sell our gas. So put it in context. In 5 years, we're now producing 50 million tons. We also have 50 million tons under construction. So by 2025, maybe earlier, we will be able to produce 100 million tons from the United States. And in order to evacuate the excess gas that we have in the United States, without which we either flare or we cannot produce our oil, neither option is very attractive. We need to build another 100 million tons. So sometime next decade, the United States will be exporting 200 million tons of LNG.
Maybe just one more before we open it up to the audience for some questions. We've had a couple of FIDs make it across the finish line over the last year or so. How do you think about the cadence of additional projects moving forward? Obviously, Tellurian Driftwood is in the mix. Over the next, call it 6, 12, 18 months. Do you think it's just a handful, or do you think there's a wave, or how do you think about that?
Well, FIDs are nice, but in trying to predict the future, I'm going to talk about the past. FID ended up being a nice step, but not a sufficient step in the past, because people were able to deliver first gas as short as 50 months after FID and as long as 90 months after FID. So your level of preparation and the speed at which you actually build the project and deliver it of the good quality is also critical. So rather than look at FID today, we try to handicap what we think is going to happen over the next few years. And our view is, for the next 5 years, we are not going to be building on a global basis a sufficient amount of liquefaction to meet the growing demand. Therefore, prices will increase in order to discourage demand.
Great. Why don't we see if there's any questions from the audience? Right in front over here. Just the front row.
Hello, I'm Jordi Izio from the Leaders for Tomorrow program, geologist in Harvard University. I'd like to know how do you think and how do you experiment the impact of this energy transition of unconventional resources exploitation?
Of what?
The exploitation of unconventional resources like shale gas and unconventional. My English is maybe not good enough, but
I'm not sure I understood the question, so I'm
the
sorry.
impact of the energy transition on the unconventional resources exploitation.
Well,
I think he's asking about, yeah, just shale resources and the
Shale.
availability of them as we talk about this transition.
I think the resource is there. It's prolific. It's very, very attractively priced and costed today. It has some disadvantages and advantages. You have to be very careful about how you exploit it and what the consequences are, but it's all feasible and it's all manageable. So it's an incredible resource. For the United States, it's a blessing because we went from being a very large importer of oil and gas to self-sufficient and soon a net exporter of hydrocarbons on a net basis. It's incumbent on us to do it responsibly and to do it intelligently, and this is very, very easily done. It's not very complicated. We just have to be willing to pay the cost and do it. But it's such a blessing that it would be criminal not to do it correctly.
Any other questions from the audience? So we've got time. Let me ask you one more, just as a follow-up to that. How much is some of the tightness in the capital markets more focused on the upstream, risk of the availability of that molecule for the LNG industry as a whole? Especially focused more on oil and the Permian, let's say. Does that put associated gas production at risk, in your view?
I think memories are very short. 5 years ago, we were paying over $100 a barrel, and the price of gas in Europe was $11 to $12. In Asia, was $15 to $16. Nobody was talking about anything except how unaffordable it was and how it drove economies into recessions. And fast forward 5 years, the cycle has gone in a different direction. Up until 2 years ago, Wall Street was throwing money at energy projects at every level. Equity is very cheap. High yield was 6%, and people just gave the industry money as if it was going out of style. And then all of a sudden, everything is drying up because the returns were not there. Hey, we gave the industry too much money and they didn't know what to do with it. So they made bad decisions. So now we're in the exact reverse cycle. We went from representing 15% of the market capitalization in the United States to now 4.5%. And the industry really is about 11 to 12% of the economy. So we are now underfunded. So it's a cyclical business. It has been a cyclical business forever. It is a business that is full of surprises because you can build a regas facility thinking you're not going to need gas and find out that you're in trouble and have to turn around and actually make it into a liquefaction facility. So, and all this in a short span of 10 years. So we are now starting the next cycle where we're going to underfund the industry, and we will pay the price for this in 3 or 4 years. So it's a cyclical business. It always has been. It always will be.
Great. I think that's all the time we have. Charif, thank you very much.
Thank you.